If you were to ask 100 subcontractors, vendors, tradesmen, what's the biggest hurdle to getting into a builder? I think 90% would say price. Why? Because they're not skilled at doing business with builders. They don't understand what builders truly want from them. So they default to price as an issue, and that's their crutch, right? They don't understand what the builders truly want and need from them. And above all else, consistency. A builder is risk averse. It's in their DNA. I want a sub that's going to finish on budget and that's not going to nickel and dime me. Performance has to be a given, right? But I want a trade partner, not a vendor. And there's a distinction. A transactional trade partner, I need $50 for a dry run charge. I need $75 for this. Well, you want me to reinstall that? I got to charge you. I've never in my career, over 68,000 new homes, never one dry run charge. Not a single one, ever. Forbidden. Builders remember who nickel and dimes, right? Builders also remember who make things easier.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Krisa. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Well, my friend Don Bronchick, a fellow patriot, Ukrainian from the old country, I'm delighted to have you on the call today. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I do too. Thanks for having me.
Well, the couple pre-calls that we've done, have lasted days. So I've rested up enough now that I'm ready to do this interview.
You've
and
recovered?
It kind of makes me laugh that you said, you're kind of shy and coming out of your shell.
Oh, yeah.
So I think our audience is in for a real treat because the real Don is going to manifest before them like the albatross coming out. Is it the albatross or seagull that comes out of the flames? I get those two birds mixed up.
The phoenix comes out of the flames, I believe.
Yeah, making a long story short, welcome to the call, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Okay, so part of what I was fascinated about in your bio and in the conversations that we had, you've done it all. Like you've covered basically every facet of construction that there is. And typically, I'll interview production builders and we talk about how did you do this? What's your relationship with money? And it becomes very pertinent to other builders that are looking to scale. You've been there, you've done that, but you've also done so many other things that I think complement the process. So I think this will be a great conversation because there's so many different layers that we could add to it. So before we get into who you are as the builder beast, which is rather apparent by the beard and the shirt and everything else, give us the backstory. Like once upon a time, you're playing in your parents' backyard. What was that trajectory, that path
That's
that
funny.
put you down the trail?
How did I first get introduced to the world of construction?
Yeah, exactly.
Believe it or not, it was as a side job. When I was a young man in my late 20s, I was working a second job at Home Depot, which I got to know because I was a vendor for Home Depot prior to that. So I had two young daughters, toddlers, and they needed some more money, right? Like anybody, just having to hustle. So a store manager that I knew gives me a job at a local store, and I get put in the building materials department. Could have put me in outside garden for all I knew about construction at that time. But while I was in the department, and it was for, a year and change, I learned so much. And I got to talk to a lot of folks that are in construction. And I just found it interesting how things got put together. There were parts and pieces on the shelf that I didn't know what they were for. There was a lot of terminology that, of course, was brand new to me. So I just gravitated to that world, not home improvement from that aspect of the retail, just construction. And as it turned out, my best friend, he and I had worked together in the chemical business prior, he had started a hurricane shutter manufacturing company. This was coming on the heels of Hurricane Andrew in 92. So now we're talking 94, roughly 95. So he started a hurricane shutter company. And then the building code changed in South Florida, requiring storm protection on all new construction. Storm protection, meaning protection of the glazed openings. It changed construction dramatically in South Florida forever. So as he started to get traction, he realized, hey, there's an opportunity now that it's codified and it's in the building code. I'll pivot and start selling to home builders. And he did that for about a year and was installing maybe 5-8 homes a week. And he felt he was big enough to hire his first employee, and that was me. And that's how I first got into construction around 1996, I believe. Just selling to production builders.
That's such an interesting tidbit because that carries over into production builders as well when they're starting off. And it may be a couple of guys. Like typically what I've seen, somebody's a framer or they're pouring concrete And they get this idea, hey, we could be doing this. Like, why are we doing it for somebody else? We could be doing that. So a bunch of guys will get together and they'll build their first home. They do a couple homes and that thing will grow. And usually one guy will be the leader. They form that company. And the blockage, if you will, is the mindset that I have to know everything and I have to do it all. And because of that, they can never scale because they're stuck. And you would appreciate this being an author yourself. The E Myth with Michael Gerber, if you're focused on working in the business, you can never work on the business. And that's where they're trapped. And you just hit it there brilliantly. Your friend had the wherewithal to say, hey, okay, I've got as far as I can go with me. It's time now to expand and I got to bring in somebody else. And in a production style builder, it's the exact same thing. They have to let go of the ego. And once they do that, I need a production manager, I need a superintendent, then the business really takes off.
Well, I agree with you. I think the biggest problem is that the business owners, when they get started, they are so fearful of delegation, right? And if you don't delegate, you by default have limited your growth. I mean, there's a very low ceiling for someone who's not willing to delegate. So my friend had a very clear vision for where he wanted to take the business once the building code changed. So he did something very smart. And a lot of what I know today and a lot of what I teach started with lessons that I learned in the hurricane shutter company working for my friend before I became a partner there as well. Here was the lesson. He could have focused his search for his first employee within the world of construction. Wouldn't that make sense? But he didn't. He wanted the right person, the right character. I'll teach them construction. I want the right individual who shares my passion, my drive, my energy level, my integrity, my drive to success or, to be successful, right? Somebody that wants more, but most importantly, who would represent his company and his name, at the highest levels. And I think this is something where a lot of business owners make a tactical error. They hire for resume instead of character. And it's an important distinction. And we built a powerhouse. We did. We built a company that we peaked at, I think, 24 million a year, but that was in 2004. In today's dollars, it's over a $40 million business. And again, we were just manufacturing and installing storm protection. But the overarching message here is he had a vision, right? He didn't just hang a shingle one day and said, okay, let's try to sell shutters. He knew where he wanted to go and mapped it out. And that's how I learned.
There's a builder that I interviewed in California, Adrian Avera, and they're doing about 800 doors a year. And his epiphany came when he had a heart attack at the tender age of 29.
Oh, boy.
29.
Yikes.
And basically saw the face of God and thought, I got to be changing things here. So he was going after his first project manager and did the typical, posted the ad, looked at resumes, and everybody on paper looked great. But what he discovered is paper has nothing to do with reality. And he came to the mindset that I want somebody that's eager to learn, that's excited about the job, and more importantly, is willing to listen. Right? Because he's got a culture, his company has a culture that he's painstakingly taken time to develop. And he doesn't want to dilute that in any way or poison it, if you will, with the wrong person. So it wasn't so much about the experience because he could now teach that person on the job how to be a project manager under the way he wants things done. And then he took it to the point where now this guy's independent. He can do whatever not ever what he wants, but I know he's going to do it well. So now when I bring in a new project manager, I don't have to train them. I hand them over to him. Right?
It's funny. I call that hiring for character over resume. And too often people look at it on paper. And I understand when you're receiving a pile of resumes, you start there, right? But what I teach my clients and what I teach from the stage is you need to recognize and have identified your culture and who you want to be as a company before you're hiring, right? Because you want to bring in people that mirror that culture and what you're trying to affect. Otherwise, you're going to end up 6, 12 months down the road with an ego problem, somebody who's trying to swim upstream, right? You want the old cliche of everybody singing out of the same hymn book. And I think it's important for folks when they're hiring to really nail down what's the type of person that I want. And it might not be from your industry. If you write down your characteristics, for example, when I was hiring salespeople however many years ago, 25 plus years ago in the hurricane shutter trade, it was a very niche industry. So it wasn't like there were stacks of people who had expertise in hurricane shutters that were available for me to choose from. Didn't exist, right? I had to hire people and bring them in and train them. So what I did was I thought about what other industries have salespeople that have similar characteristics to what I need. Well, what do I need? I need somebody who's capable of knocking on doors, right? I need somebody who's capable of maintaining an account, of drilling deeper in the account, somebody who's capable of building relationships, forging new ones, representing my company well. Believe it or not, when I was in my 20s, I worked for a food service distributor as a salesperson, and I went, that's the industry. They knock on doors all day. They take care of this. And you know what? I hired a number of folks from that world. All I had to do was teach them construction, but the business mindset was already there. In fact, I'll share a quick story with you that's in my book, Hiring for, again, Character Over Resume. A couple of years into the shutter business, we were starting to gain some real traction. And it was not uncommon to have crews show up at the door, inquiring about getting work from us because we had the preponderance of work. So my office manager comes in one day and she says, there's a guy outside wants to see you about an installer position. I said, well, at the moment, I'm not hiring. And by the way, it's important for folks who run crews, don't overhire. If you dilute your existing crew's income, you're going to negatively impact them, which is bad for you. So I always told my crews, I won't ever hire a new crew, an additional crew, until your plates are full or if your work quality starts to suffer, right? So I tell her, I don't have any time and I'm not hiring. She comes back a few minutes later. She goes, he really wants to work here. He knows you by name. He wants to work here. Please just go talk to him. He's a really nice guy. So I go outside and I chat with him. And David was the most enthusiastic young man I'd ever met. He's probably in his, mid 20s, late 20s at the time, from Jamaica. And he worked at a local Home Depot in the tool corral. And he had such an energy about him. He would ask everybody that came into his store, what do they do for a living? And he would just chat them up. And he said, I happened to chat with a number of different crews that work for you, and they all sing your praises and the company's praises, and they're making great money, and I want to do that too. I said, David, I'm really not hiring right now. He says, Don, I really want to work here. I said, okay, let's start here. What kind of truck do you drive? He says, a Honda Accord. That would be strike one. Number two, what kind of tools do you have? Now, in my trade, I'm expecting to hear chop saws and hammer drills and, extension ladders with standoffs and all that good stuff, right? And he says, well, I've got hammers, screwdrivers. And I said, oh boy, that's strike two. I said, what kind of experience do you have installing shutters? He says, I've never done it. Okay, David, we're done, right? You're a nice guy, but we're done. I think it was about 3 or 4 days later, my office manager comes in and says, you're not going to believe this, David's back. I said, son of a gun. He says, Don, you got to go outside and talk to him. So I finally relented. I go outside and there's David standing next to a brand new F-250. Brand new. And he said, this afternoon, I'm going back to my Home Depot and I'm picking up, and he shows me a list of all the stuff he's buying. He said, I really want to work here. Now, what kind of a dope would I be if I turned this guy away, right? Someone who went out on his own and got a new truck and that's commitment. That's who I want. So I said, listen, I'll bring you on. I'll put you on as a customer service tech, an apprentice. You'll learn with a senior guy for 6 months. And if you stick with it, I'll put you on as a crew. He did. And long story short, he became an area manager for us. He managed about 100 installations a month. And he went on to own his own company.
Wow. Did he actually buy the truck, or you just brought it over, like he took it for a demo drive?
No, he had it. He had it for as
Yeah.
long as he was with us, and one of the finest people I'd ever known. In fact, after he relocated to Georgia with his wife, my wife and I at the time, we drove up and we were on a trip and we visited with him in Georgia. Just my point to the story is, when you have an opportunity to bring somebody in who can make a difference, you can always teach them your business and teach them your trade, right? Hire for character over resume. That's the message.
I would think that the win there too, aside from the enthusiasm, that reinvigorates you because if it's the right characters you say and they've got that right energy, I think it transfers over to you and gets you, what's the word, re-excited about the business that you're in. Is that fair
It
to say?
does, and it's funny because you'll know intuitively once you as a business owner really have clarity on who you want to be as a company, right? I'm a premium provider this, I'm a price entry level, over here, whatever your identity is. Once you have that clarity, it makes your hiring process much easier and you have a better chance of long-term success. You have a better chance of the marriage lasting, right? And you also have to obviously be wary of, people that are job hopping for dollars, but I'll tell it to you I'll give you the same concept on the reverse side of the coin. When I was again in the hurricane shutter business, we were on a very rapid growth spurt. Also mirroring the South Florida construction market in the early 2000s was insanity. I think Florida was pulling close to 130,000 single family permits a year at the time. So we were just also riding along with it. And we got to a point where I needed another senior guy for the field. But for this position, I really did prefer someone who at least understood construction, if not shutters. Well, one of my competitors, and again, we didn't play nicely in the sandbox with our competitors. My mission was to put them out of business. And I say that unabashedly. That was my job. So I got the phone number of the number two guy at one of my competitors who I'd heard was well liked out in the field and was a good person. So I get the guy's phone number and call him. I introduce myself. Oh, I know who you are. You have to understand, we were putting a hurting on this company. I mean, really, really putting a hurting on him. And I'm trying to recruit the guy. And he says the following to me. I'll never forget it. He said, Don, I don't understand why you operate the way you do. He said, there's so much work out there for everybody. And I went, you're not the right guy to work for me. Now, that one sentence I was able to quickly understand. He's not the right guy. I don't know that I would have been successful if I pressed him, probably not, but it didn't matter. I knew he wasn't the right person to fit in our culture. And that's the message.
It sounds so respectfully, it sounds like it's a culture of piranhas at the same time as somebody trying to nip your people away.
You know, it's funny. I had very low turnover in my businesses, and it was not by accident. Again, when you hire properly, you give yourself a better chance of that person sticking long term. But it's also a little different. Too many business owners look at payroll as, giving somebody a dollar is extracting another tooth, right? And then what eventually happens, or what often happens, is a prized employee walks into your office one day and says, I'm giving you my notice. And you scramble. Why? And they're going to your competitor or just another, tradesman, another company in the trades. And the only answer is money, usually, right? If you're providing a good environment. So my philosophy was, I'm going to make sure I pay people properly so that they don't feel undervalued, that they don't have a reason to look, right? And when you pay people slightly above market for the best ones, you can also demand and expect more out of them. So for me, the turnover wasn't really a problem because I understood something intuitively. If the employees are simply coming to work, punching in and out, figuratively speaking, it's just a job. There's no loyalty and they will have no concerns about jumping ship. So I took a much different approach. Most business owners, Michael, they're very guarded with their corporate information, right? They hold their cards very close to the vest and they feel as though their employees, it's below their pay grade. They don't have a right to know. I always believed in being transparent about victories and wins. I made sure the whole company knew when we got a new contract, not just the sales department. But everybody in the company knew where we were going, what we were trying to do. I wanted them to feel a part of something, not just coming to clock in. And when your employees feel as though they are a part of a winning team, I would take my sales department out. Anytime we set a milestone, a new record, I took them out for an evening. Yeah. So what? It cost me $1,500, big deal. Nobody quit. Nobody left.
That's the part that I was waiting for because it's more than just about the money. Because if you're paying $50 an hour, I'm just throwing a number out there, and somebody says, "Oh, I want that guy. I'm going to pay him 55." Then there is no loyalty. They're just going to follow the buck. I think this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, that there's a culture that you're trying to build
That's the
within your
key.
business, and are they a part of that culture and the vision? When you talk about the team, do they see what the goal is, the end goal, and do they feel that they're a part of that? And when you put that all together and you have the money involved, that's when it all really, I think, takes off.
Well, it's funny because you touched on something that I think is a real deficiency in the industry, and it's this: too few business owners put out budgets, right? So, as I said to one of my clients who doesn't have any sort of revenue budget, I said, "So, how do you know what a good month is?" The answer is by what feels good, which is no way to run a company, right? So, as it relates to our conversation, the way I would handle that with employees is very simple. I wanted them to know what our targets were every month in units, in dollars, right? The other part of it is you need to recognize that sometimes your employees need things broken down for them so that they can understand. Don't assume that they know what you know as a business owner. So, for example, as it relates to employees and decisions, I wanted them to know what our margins were. I wanted them to know what the impact of their decisions were on the margin, right? I empowered people. And I think this is the following is a really important point for folks that are managing others. Explain the why. I agree that there are times in business when you simply need to bark an order because you don't have the time. There's something going on. Look, this is the way. Okay. But when you explain to your team why you want things done a certain way and what the value is, the logic, and the detriment and what happens bad if you don't do it that way, you'll get much more buy-in, right? And I found something else. When you entrust your team with company knowledge, right? Again, I've known contractors, they won't even publicize or let their team know what their revenue is. How does anybody feel good about what the company's achieving? So share with them, right? Make sure somebody understands the impact of, I'll make something up. You got a warehouse manager and he ordered 3 extra pallets because the supplier offered him 7% off, but he doesn't understand cash flow and the damage that he just did to the company, right? So constantly teach your people, right? Teach them above their pay grade. Teach them what gross margin means. Teach them what COGS are. Teach them what SG&A expenses mean and what EBITDA means. I would show my people the P&L so that they could understand, because here's the other problem. Too many employees allow themselves to believe that the boss is getting filthy rich. The reality in construction, we all know the margins, that's rarely the case. I mean, you can make a great living, obviously. But my point is, when the more you keep your folks in the dark, the less you will get from them as far as helping you navigate to where you want to go.
Are you glad you're running a business in Florida and not New York? Because that mindset's been flipped on its head.
Well, I ran my businesses in Florida, and a couple of years ago, my wife and I escaped to Colorado. It's funny. I miss the water. I miss Florida. I miss a lot of my friends, but the building climate there was unlike anything else. And you have to remember, there's no seasons. You're building 12 years straight in Florida. Excuse me, 12 months out of the year without any seasonality. So the machine doesn't stop. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little different out here in Colorado when there's snow on the ground and they're trying to dig a basement. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, at what point, let's pull you up from behind the glass, no pun intended. Was there a time that you were actually working in the construction side of things
You mean as a builder or as a subcontractor
as a
on site?
subcontractor or as a builder, like actually hammer in hand?
Me personally, nope.
Okay.
I started out, it's funny. I literally never installed a shutter. I never installed a window. I've been on site. Could I? Of course. Could I today at 60 years old? Well, maybe a non-impact window. So I had to become an expert at it, right? And it's funny because a lot of folks that I've met in my position focused on the business side of things without becoming an expert in their trade, right? There are so many small companies that get sold to a buyer, and that buyer may not have a clue what HVAC is, but it's a profitable company and he's got to learn it on the fly. So for me, I always felt that the general construction knowledge was helpful, was critical, which is a separate conversation. But learning my trade, I learned it like an expert. I mean, literally like an expert. I would spend hours in the field with my guys. I would act as an apprentice, as a helper sometimes in the beginning just to learn, but it was all by observation and just, just being in the field, literally
Yeah.
being in the field as installations are happening.
As I'm navigating this conversation, I'm trying to keep in mind what are relevant questions that a production builder would be asking. One that comes to mind, going back to when you were talking about the culture, and I would assume that you had systems in place, like a consistency of how you did things. Is there a cost associated to not being consistent?
Of course. Look, builders pay for consistency. That's what they want. And here's the biggest misconception among subcontractors that I chat with. If you were to ask 100 subcontractors, vendors, tradesmen, what's the biggest hurdle to getting into a builder? I think 90% would say price. Why? Because they're not skilled at doing business with builders. They don't understand what builders truly want from them. So they default to price as an issue, and that's their crutch, right? Well, I can't sell it so cheap, so I can't. They don't understand what the builders truly want and need from them. And above all else was your word, consistency. A builder is risk averse, right? It's in their DNA, right? Time is money in construction, perhaps unlike any other industry. Time is money. So what I learned early on was what a builder wants from their sub. And what they want is really what they don't want. They don't want any headaches. They don't want grief. The purchasing people for production builders, they don't want the superintendent going to their VP of construction and said, hey, you hired Bronchick drywall. These guys are killing us. They haven't passed inspection the first time on a given house. They've added 4 cycle days to every lot, and I can't get a hold of them. Why did you hire them? See, purchasing managers are more concerned, understandably, with job preservation than they are about job performance on that side of things. What they want is, I don't want the VP of purchasing or a division president 8 months from now chewing me out in a meeting because I hired Bronchick Drywall. And when I was asked, why did I hire them? Well, they were 4% cheaper. That's not how it works. What the buyer wants is no grief. And by the way, once a job site's active, the last thing a builder wants to do is change a sub out, right? It's not just the recontracting and the work and purchasing. If it's a trade that requires permitting or drawings, right? They may have to do a change of contractor. There's a lot of work involved. What lots? Where do we cut them off? Who's going to take over warranty? Will the new vendor even handle warranty? So a lot of builders really, really avoid making the change. But the reality is what they want above all else is to reduce the perceived risk in hiring your firm to begin with. So when you operate with consistency, constantly, right? If you're always there, always delivering, always on time, always communicating, you reduce the perception of risk, which elevates your chances of being hired for the next job.
If you were to put on a contractor's hat right now and you were hiring trades, what is it that you're looking for? Like we mentioned consistency. There must be other elements on that list?
Well, I want subs that understand what value add means. And the last thing that I want is a nickel and dime sub. If I interview them, it's not just their bid. I want to know, did they finish the project on budget, right? Because one of the oldest tricks in the book, and we all know it's out there, unethical subcontractors will low bid you to get the work, and then they'll paper your job site to death, right? Extra work order this, dry run charge that, change order over here. And that's how they claw back margin. So my biggest concern, if I were building, and I've only built a number of houses, I was a general contractor in Florida and North Carolina. So I spent most of my career on the subcontracting side. So I know what to look out for. I want a sub that's going to finish on budget and that's not going to nickel and dime me. Performance has to be a given, right? And you do what you got to do to vet there. But I want a trade partner, not a vendor. And there's a distinction, right? A transactional trade partner, I need $50 for a dry run charge. I need $75 for this. Well, you want me to reinstall that? I got to charge you. By the way, my policy when I ran those companies, I never I've never in my career over 68,000 new homes, never one dry run charge. Not a single one, ever. Forbidden. Builders remember who create more work for them on site, and that is more work. Builders remember who nickel and dimes, right? Builders also remember who make things easier. So if I were the one that was issuing contracts, first thing I'm looking for is someone who'll finish the job on budget, who is flexible enough and who understands the bigger picture.
There's a nuance and a subtlety there between the builder and the contractor. Are there telltale signs that a builder will pick up on that the contractor doesn't realize before they consummate that relationship?
You mean as far as when the subcontractor is trying to sell their way into a builder? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Because the builder is looking for something, and it's almost like playing cards. There's a tell, if you will, and the builder is looking for that tell that the contractor is. Like, are you full of bullshit, or are you actually going to deliver? What are those subtleties that a builder should be looking for?
Well, I mean, look, again, builders are risk averse, so very few builders are willing to take the first bite of the apple, right? So the first thing a builder is going to want to know is who else do you work for, right? And interestingly, in the world of new construction, if you have a roster of custom builders that you've been working for and are then now pivoting, trying to move into production, the production world sort of rejects that experience and doesn't place any value on it, meaning you don't know my world. That's one house every so often, and it's not the pace and volume, right, of production. However, the reverse is not true. Your production performance and history does lend great value and credibility to moving into the custom world. You'd have to convince someone that you know how to execute on the trade, the physical performance of the trade. A builder, when they're interviewing subs, obviously wants to see. Right, every builder wants to make sure the bases are covered, right? License, insurance, right? All that kind of nonsense. Okay, so you covered the basics. And there are builders out there, by the way, that will award contracts, license, insurance, lowest price, you're hired, right? And that's why I said earlier, you need to know who you are as a company, because for me, that those weren't the builders that I wanted, right? One of my favorite expressions is if you get hired on price, you get fired on price. So as far as what the builders need to look out for as far as red flags on the subcontractor side, I know this sounds silly, but I look at it more as the human side than the technical side, right? When you're having a conversation with somebody, if they don't give you the impression that they understand your world, if through their dialogue, they're not communicating to you that they understand what you need from them on site, right? Here's the key. You're not buying product. You're buying service, right? And I would be very lasered in on, and again, I only had this on 6 homes that I built, but for me, I was looking for subcontractors that understood what being a trade partner is, right? Again, I'm buying service, not a product. And I think at the 40,000-foot level, it's a paradigm shift that needs to be had on both sides of the desk, right? I teach subcontractors that, I would ask people, I could be speaking in a room and say, what business are you in? And I start pointing, and what do you think people say, right? I'm a plumber. I'm in the electrical business. I'm an HVAC guy. I'm a roofer. And I would say, no, you're not. You're in the service business. And the sooner you embrace that concept and permeate that throughout your entire company, you're going to be stuck. What product does a drywaller have to offer that that no other drywaller has to offer? There are so few opportunities for somebody to approach a builder with something truly unique that nobody else has. It almost never happens in our industry, right? If you're going to put something in your home, you can buy it from anybody. And my message is almost everything, unless you're a real artisan in a custom home and, high-end multi-million dollar in the world of production, which is really where my expertise is. In the world of production, no, no, that's not what they're concerned about. So at the end of the day, I think it's important that subs recognize I'm in the service business. And then you have to make sure everybody throughout your company understands that, because when your builders or prospective builders are calling your company, I don't care what it's for. They need drawings for a permit. They need a quote. They need a piece of paper. Whatever it is they need, it's a warranty ticket, must be responded to urgently. So that's really what I'm looking for. Do they get it? Does that potential subcontractor understand that I need them to respond urgently? Are they a trade partner? Much more so than the bid. But then I also look for value adds,
Is
which
it
is
fair to say that we could break this down into two components? There's the service that you're talking about, the thing that they do. There's the experience that results from the service they deliver. Let me put this in a context. Let's say you're at a restaurant, right? We sit down, we have a meal. The waiter is fantastic. He says, Don, here's what I recommend today. I wouldn't do the fish. Like he looks over, both shoulders and he says, we had problem with the fish. Even though it's on the special, Don, I wouldn't do the fish. So that's the experience, if you will. And the service is actually the meal that's delivered. When you experience both of those, like if you have exemplary service and a great experience, then you become a raving fan and you'll tell people.
sure.
You could have a great meal, but the waiter sucked, which now ruins the experience. Can you marry those two in terms of what we're talking about right now as well? So the builder has an expectation. He's working with that contractor, with that trade. There's that experience and then the service delivered.
If you have a builder and you have a subcontractor and they're looking to get married, right? The way I always positioned it was let's see if we're the right fit first, and then we'll see if we can make the dollars work. And when you do that on either side of the desk, you give yourself a much greater chance of a long-term marriage, right? Than, a 6-month in and out. I'm not sure what specifically a builder can do to vet. I will tell you that in my entire career, I can count on one hand how many people in purchasing actually ever left their office to go out in the field and look at our work before hiring us. And that's something that quite frankly should happen more, but it just doesn't, right? Purchasing folks just don't get out of their office. And I know I didn't really answer your question here properly, Michael. I got to get you to clarify that for me a little bit.
I was talking about using a comparison between a restaurant experience. So you've got the service, which is the thing that's provided. So at a restaurant, it's the meal versus the experience. It's when you put the two together.
Okay, so here's what it boils down to. There are probably, depending upon the size of the market, anywhere from several to a dozen companies who can competently install drywall, just picking a trade, right? Or that can frame a house, fly trusses, lay flooring, go on, right? It's silly to think there's only one or two guys in a given market that are competent in that trade. So the delivery of product, right? The product itself is typically specified and spelled out in the scope of work. So a drywaller is not just leaving his vendor to decide, and I understand there's code issues, whether it's a half inch, 5/8, et cetera. But my point is most building components have been commoditized. Most, right? There's very few trades that you wouldn't say is a commodity at this point. Look at copper, look at, PEX, you go on and on and on, right? So what ends up happening is the only way to differentiate yourself as a vendor is through service, right? So I teach people, and what I practiced myself was there's nothing special about my window because there's dozens of other companies selling the identical window because I wasn't the manufacturer, I was a dealer. So the builders could literally buy the same window from me as well as many other dealers in town. So the product really becomes the given, right? And there's an expectation, if you are in the trades, there's an expectation that you can at least install competently. So where does the risk come in for the builder? It's on the service side, right? Are you going to add cycle days to my home? Are you going to add expense? Are you going to pay for my job site? The service becomes everything. And that's quite frankly what my whole book is about. It's about communication and service. And this is an important aspect, building relationships. You must focus on both the office and the field. One or the other is not sufficient. You've got to have superior relationships in the field and at the office level. But at the end of the day, Michael, the differentiator is the service, right? Does the business owner of that painter, closet shelving, kitchen cabinet guy. Do they really get what that builder needs from them? Again, they could buy cabinets from anybody, right? It's all about service and then the relationships. Well, where do the relationships factor? Relationships reduce perception of risk, right? And that's the key. So you have a track record with people. So I never focused on product. When I would go do presentations in either business, I didn't bring shutter samples or a window sample with me, not unless a builder specifically asked to see something. It was a conversation about service and how I'm going to take care of your job site. And that's the biggest differentiator. People need to recognize the product. Anybody can supply that. It's all about how you take care of the job site. And are you a trade partner? Are you fair?
So far, we've been sharing a lot of what I'll call Donisms, the gospel according
Oh,
to
I've got a
Dom.
lot of them.
Yeah,
I've
that
got
you've
a lot
picked
of
up
them.
along the way. Was there a moment, I guess, with all your decades of experience that you kind of said, aha, I'm recognizing common problems in the industry? And what was that moment, number one? And number two, was that the genesis of Builder Beastie?
Well, it's funny you say that because I guess they are intertwined. My aha moment was the awareness that my competition, generally speaking, was subpar. And they had work because there was nobody better and there were no other options, right? The builders had to hire someone for that trade, right? So for me, it was the awareness that people, my competitors were not working as hard. They were not putting in the hours. I could just tell we were innovators. We had a very important epiphany early on in the hurricane shutter industry and going back into the 1990s. And it was, we can't be a Me Too company, right? We can't, everyone else is doing it this way. And we said that way doesn't work, meaning installation, right? Again, service. I'm not talking about the physical storm shutter. And we went, the way they're installing shutters doesn't work. So we came up with a new way. And we went around to all the builders and talked to them about the service. For me, the biggest, you know, reveal or aha was price is not the barrier, it's service. Once we realized that we could charge more than our competitors as long as we gave them a reason to pay more. And it was that simple, right? Subcontractors are so consumed with builders won't buy anything but the lowest price. And it's such a cop out. It's because that sub isn't doing the work to identify what the builder really needs from us, what my competition is offering, right? And by the way, for the subcontractors watching this right now, do you know what your competition does? Do you know what they do well? Do you know what they don't do well? You need to know this so that when you're in the next, bid out for a new community and a builder says to you, well, I'm going with, Michael HVAC over here, you could say, well, he only uses this and not that. So it's really important that the subcontractor understands their marketplace and focuses on the experience, as you said, right? It's the old cliche of selling the steak, not the sizzle.
Yeah.
We're selling the sizzle, not the steak. I
Well,
said it
part of
backwards,
it
right?
too, they have to be able to articulate what it is that makes them unique in the first place. And if they can't form that sentence, put that together in a paragraph, then they don't deserve the business. It's that simple.
Well, that's 100% correct. Look, at the end of the day, you have to be able to communicate in construction, right? And the better communicator you are, the more work you will get. It really is that simple. It's funny. I had a project manager in Palm Beach years ago, and he was towards the tail end of his career, close to retirement. He kind of looked like the Morton's fisherman kind of guy, right? I mean, this guy was salty, crusty, and made it known right off the bat that he didn't like me or my company. We had never worked for the guy before. He was just one of those guys, and we won him over. How? By just being consistent and being a good sub. And finally, one day I was in the trailer chatting with him, and I said, Jody, what was it that finally, you know, got you to get off my back or something like that, in a joking way? And he said, this was his answer, very short, because you guys always did what you said you were going to do. And he goes, and you'd be surprised how few people do. That was it. There was no magic. It's just about being consistent and showing up. And here's another important thing for subs to understand. Again, we mentioned earlier, Michael, time is money, right? And here's a huge mistake people make. They get bad news and they delay telling their builder. You've got to notify them. If they expect you at lot 14 on Thursday morning at 9 a.m., you had better be there 9 a.m. at lot 14. And the moment you know you can't, you better tell them, because the more time they have to react, the less painful it is for them. And subs that are new, Michael, that don't know the industry, they don't consider that me not showing up Thursday morning means he may have to recall the inspection that he had, reschedule other trades that were coming in behind me. It messes things up,
Well, it's a domino effect. They don't
of
realize that
course.
by putting off that one little, like that they're a piece of that. And by not communicating with the contractor or the builder, they're setting a whole storm in motion.
100% true. I mean, look, the more notice you give, the less painful it is for them, right? The worst thing, it's funny, I had a standing policy always in my companies. If I ever get a call from a super or a PM and says we're late or we didn't show and you hadn't called them prior, we're going to have a problem. So all of my area managers knew the moment, if you're supposed to be there Thursday morning and you know which crew is going, and Wednesday afternoon it pours and their job didn't get finished and they've got to go back to that house to finish Wednesday morning, fine. But Wednesday afternoon, you're calling the guy for lot 14 Thursday morning and saying, hey, Joe, I got a problem, right? And as long as you do that, you'll get the pass. But it's the no-show that's the killer.
I think this goes back to what you were talking about. Jody was the guy, the crusty old
Yeah,
sailor
yeah,
guy
yeah,
that you won
yeah,
over.
yeah,
And he
yeah.
basically said it was the consistency. I think in pictures. So for me, it's that you're cutting checks with your mouth that aren't bouncing. So every time you make a commitment or a promise, you're fulfilling on it. When you don't, it is
Own it.
exactly the same as bouncing a check.
But the key is, listen, you're never going to be perfect, nor was I. Stuff happens, right? It's life.
Oh, wait a minute. In your bio, it said with a capital P, perfection is my did I misread that?
No, no, no. My wife accused me of being perfect once, but actually, no, she never did. She'd laugh when she would hear me say that. No, there's no such thing as perfection in construction. And the successful contractors are aware of that, meaning their bids reflect something may go off the rails so that I don't have to nickel and dime for everything, right? There's always going to be an issue. What builders want to know is, how do you respond to it? Do you hide? Do you not answer your phone? Do you point the finger at other subs? Or do you show up, own it, and get it done? And if I were to give one piece of advice to a contractor that's already on a job site and you would like to continue working for that builder, resist the urge to nickel and dime. The dollars you will get from an EWO, and I'm talking small stuff, right? If a builder says, hey, I need you to rip that out and put in a new one, whatever, and there's tens of thousands, of course. I'm talking small, nickel and dime. It upsets and offends builders, and it says to them, you're not a trade partner, you're a transactional vendor, and you'll be replaced. Maybe not on that job site, but you won't get the next one. You're making more work for everyone. I'll tell you, I can't, it's hard for me to put a number on the following. How many times I would bid a new community for an active account, and then that builder say to me, well, Don, you're X percent high. So aside from identifying key differentiators and what they're paying for, here's what I would normally ask and almost always win. I say, do me a favor, this other vendor, they're already working for you? Yeah. Now I'd like you to go back into their communities and to mine and see who's completing the project on budget. Because what would happen is, again, I never charged for the nickel and dime stuff. Everyone else did. So that 4% that looks good on an Excel spreadsheet today ahead of the community, at the end of the community, they're 3% more than me, right? Or 7% more than me because they papered the job site. So my biggest recommendation would be, don't charge, make a friend. Make a friend. It's much more valuable to your business. I'll tell you quickly, I was in Palm Beach County. I was awarded a job site from a builder that I had worked for previously in the hurricane shutter trade. So it was one of my first window projects, and it was a high-end luxury production community in Palm Beach County. And before I had even put the first window in, the project manager threatened to fire me. Something about paperwork, permitting. I was like, holy smokes, we haven't even put a window in yet. He was already threatening. Been with the company 20 years, right? He had a lot of power. So several houses into the community, he calls me on a Friday afternoon and says, Don, I need to see you out here. We got a problem. Lot 4, I think it was. I actually still remember that. Anyway, so I'm relatively new to windows and doors at this point, so I bring with me my field manager, my number one window guy, right? Manager. And we go out to the house, and here's the issue. In the back of the home, there's 2 sets of French doors catty corner, 12080, big openings, French doors and side lights, and they were installed. And in Florida, for folks that don't know, everything is built concrete block construction. So I'm looking at the installations, and they sure looked good to me. This was, I think, our 3rd or 4th home in. And I said, "Paul, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, that door is a quarter of an inch higher than that door." Now, I'm relatively new to the window and door trade, and I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, "So? I quarter of an inch, what's the big deal?" So I said to him, "Okay, explain to me how how that creates a problem and what you'd like me to do about it." He said, "Well, it's a mud set marble floor and it's throughout, and I don't want the homeowner to see this riser a quarter of an inch higher than that one, because French doors you can't modify the same way you can with sliding glass door tracks." So I looked at my manager and said, "Manny, can we do this? Can we replace the doors?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Paul, what do you want me to do?" He said, I want you to rip that out and raise it a quarter of an inch." "Okay, Manny, we'll send somebody out here on Monday morning, and Paul will get it done for you Monday morning, first thing." "Okay, thanks." He said, "And Don, charge me for it." I looked at him. He said, "It wasn't your fault. It was my shell contractor's fault. I put a laser on it and the lintels were a quarter of an inch off. That's not your fault. You give me a bill." And I said, "Paul, no, I got it." He said, "Don, this isn't your fault." I said, "Paul, you're my customer. I have 570 homes in front of this house." That's how big the community was. It was, I can't even remember, it was about $7 or $8 million contract. I said, "Paul, you're my customer. I got 500. I got it." So Paul was very grateful, walking back to my truck, and Manny's angry with me. He's like, "Why didn't you we had every right to charge him, Don. How could you?" Basically, he thought I was being weak. And I said, "Manny, let me ask you a question. Which is more valuable to our company? $500 in labor or making a friend out of Paul?" He looked at me, and in that instant, he understood, right? There's a bigger picture here. And that's why I advise against nickel and diming. And by the way, this guy, Paul, was the most notorious, difficult, but experienced project manager this huge builder had. Paul and I are still friends to this day. He lives in Georgia. I visited him a few times in Georgia. We would go to dinner once a month and have some beers and wings. That's how you make friends in this business. You cannot make friends by reaching your hands into people's pockets every single time.
This goes back to what we were talking about, the experience and the service, right? You provide the service, which is you're going to fix that. But the experience, when he walks away, he's going to remember you and what you did, right? I want to go back to when you talked about making that mistake. And it's funny, you said something that's very akin to what I used to say when I was teaching video, is when you make a mistake, you own it immediately. You own it. And you don't dwell on it. Oh, it's okay, here's what we did. What do we do to fix it? And what do we do so it never happens again? So basically, it boils down to you own it, get over it, and then move on. Own it, get over it, move on is what I would teach. Because the last thing you want to do is keep beating yourself up over a situation that you've already learned from, you've fixed it, and now you'll know not to do it again. So
Well,
own it, get over it, move on.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's an ancillary benefit to that approach too, which is believability and credibility,
Mhm.
right? If every single time a super, random super, were to call, and if every single time my company was like, "Hey, well, the framer did this or the shell guy did that." Do you know how many times we had to reinstall hurricane shutter hardware to sliding glass door because the flat work guy poured an inch above the snap line? Too many times to count. I never charged for that, but I made sure the builder knew that I took care of it. Look, here's the thing. When you tell a builder that I own this and they start to have trust in you, that when the time comes for you to say, "No, no, that wasn't me, it was this," they're going to believe you, right? So it's the boy who cried wolf kind of thing.
Yeah.
Own the stuff that's easy to own, right? And when the day comes, you have to cash in those chips. You've got the chips.
So let's do this. It seems that there's this dichotomy between the wolf and the villagers. And in this case, it's between the builders and the superintendents, right? So I want to play a little game. I'm just going to give you a sentence, finish the sentence for me, okay? So
Okay.
put on the builder's hat.
I didn't know
Okay.
you were a psychologist.
Yeah, yeah. I used to
By the way,
watch
I
Frasier
have
all the
I
time.
have a PhD. I have a PhD in dime store psychology. Just
Yeah.
thought I'd throw that
Well, you
out
can
there.
see all mine back there that I bought at Walmart, right? It just they came with the frame too. All right.
That's
So
funny.
you're wearing the builder's hat. Okay. Here's the
Okay.
sentence. I want you to finish it. Trusted contractors always,
Communicate.
okay. Replaceable contractors usually,
Don't perform.
the fastest way to lose a builder's trust is,
Lie. Keep what doesn't belong to you. I've seen
okay.
builders fire subs for retaining funds that they didn't earn.
And the fastest way to earn it back is,
Well, you'll never earn it back from that. That takes time. I don't know about that, but the fastest way to earn trust, honestly, I don't know that there is such a way as to do it, quote, fast. It takes time. And Michael, you actually just touched on something that's important for folks to recognize. This industry is the proverbial marathon. It is never a sprint. And when I counsel and I work with clients when I speak, if you have a sprinter's mentality and you're looking for instant gratification, you are failing before you start. Don't even bother. This industry does not support that mindset. The industry supports and rewards those that are willing to invest in those relationships. And again, investing in a relationship with a builder means both in the field and the office. And in the field, it means performing. I treat every job as an audition for the next one.
let's do this again. This time you're the superintendent. Ready?
Okay.
All right. Best contractors on my job site always,
Show up when I'm expecting them.
okay. The contractors that create the most problems usually,
That's a great question. Wow. There's so many different facets of it. And
don't
it's
think
all
about it,
about
man. Don't think about
it's
it. Do it.
performance. It's just
Okay.
performance, right? It's just performance. If I have to chase somebody as a super, I can't have them on the job site.
The one thing that gets my attention, good or bad, is,
Communication. I actually once had a builder say to me, Don, you guys actually over communicate. And then he kind of chuckled and said, I love it. And it's intentional. See, here's the thing, Michael. People have to understand it's not about, and I've had people say this to me, well, Don, you're naturally. No, forget that. It's a discipline, it's intentional. I understood 25, 30 years ago that builders require constant communication. Silence breeds distrust, right? You leave people to wonder what's going on. And for me, the real eye opener was understanding that if a subcontractor, look, if I had 1 minute to spend with somebody who wanted to go in the trades, I would say, look, over communicate, always do what you say you're going to do. Don't ever nickel and dime. Those are the basics. And if you do that and you're willing to invest, again, you got to play the long game. If you look at this, there's no instant gratification in construction. It just doesn't work that way, right? So my philosophy was, if I'm going to be doing this for a living and I'm going to be doing this for a while, and I'm going to be doing this 1, 2, 5, or 10 years from now, then I need to be working today to better my chances tomorrow and to increase my relationships and deepen them so that 5, 10 years later, I can still reap the rewards of that. I mean, I moved out of Florida 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And the relationships that I have from the industry, I've had builder friends from Florida come stay with my wife and I out here in Colorado. We go back to visit. I have friends from 30 years ago in the business that I know from construction. Too many subcontractors are not recognizing the level of investment that is required. They want shortcuts. And I don't work with those folks because they don't get it, right? You've got to recognize that it takes time to build your reputation. That is your resume. Your reputation is your resume. So, again, nobody cares if you're a builder, Michael, somebody walks in with a piece of drywall, you'd laugh at them. I mean, seriously, if they brought you a sample of their drywall, unless it had some new innovative polymer, I'm making stuff up, right?
yeah.
Unless there was a real key differentiator, It's a commodity, right? So the good news here for subcontractors is that anyone can be successful if they're willing to work harder than their competition.
Don, let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground. Anything that we missed that you want to touch on?
It's a fun industry and I love being a part of it. If I had to really laser in on one thing for folks, it's this: culture at your company. Take your team's temperature, share the wins with them, be transparent, make them feel a part of something. Because when you can get your team members, your employees, all rowing in the same direction, all taking ownership, right? And the other biggest thing as it relates to culture is accountability, right? I always fostered a culture of accountability. I didn't want someone going, well, it's their fault. You know, if you screwed up, put your hand up and say it's yours. I'll respect that. And so will your teammates, right? And by the way, on a side note on that, avoid having multiple people responsible for the same tasks because you provide an excuse to fail. And that's a big thing in business, right? You've got to remove your team's excuses for failure. Sole source accountability is the way to go if you can.
I'm going to hold up my phone and I am going to hit the timer function. Elevator pitch.
Don't ask me to do anything fast, Michael.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm putting a burr under your ass right now. The Builder Beastie.
Builder Beast.
1 minute
Consulting.
elevator pitch. What is it? Go.
I work with subcontractors and suppliers, some dealers who are looking to drive revenue within residential construction, right? I've been in the industry 30 years, 68,000 homes, 300 million in contracts. I've worked for close to 400 builders in my career and been a GC. So I've got all the legs of the stool covered. And I like to help contractors just define a path for themselves and set themselves on a path for growth, profitable growth.
Well, 32 seconds. I'm glad you cover your stool. If they want to find out more about you, where do they go?
builderbeastconsulting.com, or you can visit my LinkedIn page. You can just type my name in and you'll find me in the Builder Beast Consulting page. The website's available. You can book consulting and/or speaking engagements that way. And I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out directly to me via LinkedIn or the website to send in a contact, and I can share. I've got about 10 presentations that I deliver. For example, one on building relationships, another on the blueprint for sustainable growth. I teach a lot of risk management, right? And I don't mean hard hats on job sites, how to protect your company from financial and operational loss.
And the title of the book soon to be released?
I'm very proud. Built from the Ground Up is actually available on Amazon right now, although the official launch is going to be later in January. Built from the Ground Up. It is a distillation of the lessons I've learned in 30 years in the business. It's progressive. It's written in a very easy to read tone. I am not an MBA. I'm a field guy, right? I grew up in the field and I share with the reader what it takes to build a wildly successful business, right? You got to be disciplined. There's a recipe there, but they've got to be willing to invest and they've got to be willing to put the time in.
Mr. Don Bronchick, has been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Michael, it was a real pleasure to join you. I can't thank you enough for the time. It was a pleasure to join your show.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.